Welcome to the joint meeting of the groups working on data management plans. The title of our meeting today is Active DMPs, Turning Concepts into Action with APIs. And we have prepared some slides for you. And of course, I will start by showing you the agenda of what we have in mind for today. So we want to start with a set of 4 quick Slido polls to find out a little bit about your background, about your experience with DMPs. As always, we start with a brief introduction for newcomers, so slight information about the difference between the different groups, about the information on what the working group produced. And then in the second part, we have a floor for updates from the community. We have right now 3 presentations recorded, one from Claire. I'm not sure if Claire can join us because it will be 3 o'clock in the morning to present. So if she's not here till that time, I will show some slides on her behalf. Then we have Alberto and Marek. And this shouldn't be more than half an hour. If anyone wants spontaneously to say something, to present something in that part, basically report on anything related to data management plans, just please raise your hand after the last presentation and we can give you floor as well. Then we have the part 3 and basically part 4, where we want to have some discussion with you, where we want to discuss, reflect on what was presented by the speakers, but also this is also a possibility to bring any other topic related to data management plans. Maybe a heads up in this meeting, we quite often end up discussing about machine actionable data management plans. This is to some extent inevitable because a lot of us work on this topic. But if you want to discuss anything else than machine actionable data management plans, it's also okay. So please don't hold yourself for bringing other topics in data management planning. Okay. Any questions so far? Everything seems clear. Okay. So let's get to the first part. So I would like to ask you about your experience with DMPs. So if you can go to slido.com and put the code, or you just scan the QR code, and we would like to find out whether you're more on the receiving end or the providing end. So are you the one who had to write one? Are you the one who is reviewing them? Do you maybe require DMPs from others, so you are part of the institution or maybe a funder? Or are you coming from the tool provider perspective? So I provide tools to others. So I can see in the meeting we have 24 people. So we should get roughly 15 votes, assuming other people are AI bots. Okay, so we have so far 9 votes. We have here people providing tooling. We have people supporting. Then I had to write one. I reviewed them. I require them from others. I'm just curious about the last answer. I require them from others. Would you like to unmute and specify what's your role specifically there? Are you a funder or some other role? So nobody wants to identify himself, herself as the one who requires them from others. I know it doesn't bring you popularity.
Thomas, I can give you some insights in that.
Okay.
So we work in the data science unit in a hospital, and from the research project that we do there, we require DMPs for the projects, and the researchers are in charge of writing the DMP. So we require them.
Okay. Okay. Thanks a lot. Okay, good. But most of us, as I can see, are on the side of supporting or requiring from others. We don't have here researchers to who are writing the DMPs, and actually that makes sense because we are mostly talking in this group about supporting people in writing and creating requirements. Good. The next question I have for you is, what is your background? And here, as always, I have this question very much open, and you can provide multiple answers. So basically, what are the keywords that best describe your background? This allows us basically in the follow-up discussions to better understand, how technical, how legal, how domain-specific the discussion can be. Okay, so most of you are researchers. We have 7 answers so far. So we have some data stewards, data librarians, data engineers, data service providers. We have people with PhDs with us. Data service providers, support research, ethnographer. Okay, so I would say the usual suspects from the list of stakeholders involved in research data management, which is good. Gives us different views. Okay, let's move to the next question then. Maybe an easier one. Where are you located? This is to basically found out the geographical spread. Slovenia takes over. Slovenia, for a moment, was the biggest country in Europe. Oh, we even have some colleagues from Australia. And this is not Peter Nish, who is one of the co-chairs. Okay, so we have a nice geographical spread. We only don't have colleagues from the US, but this would not work for them really. It would be 2 o'clock in the morning. Okay, and the last question is about the RDA and the groups. So how familiar are you with RDA activities regarding DMPs and MADMPs? So how familiar are you basically with what we're doing here? So is it the first time? So I'm new here, inform me about the details, or have you been to a couple of meetings, or are you involved in the development of recommendations and you take active part in the group activities? Okay, so most of you are new here, so please feel free to ask any questions you may have. I have a short introduction. I also know from Marek Suchanek that he will be also providing some context on the developments, but if something is not clear, then it's usually us who are not explaining it properly. So please feel free to ask. Okay. Good. So that was the part of the introduction from your side. We know more or less a few things about you. You know what's your role, where you are located, and how familiar you are with the DMPs. Now maybe a few words about the groups and about the meeting to which we have connected. So basically, this is a joint meeting, and we have 2 groups. We have active DMPs interest group and DMP common standards working group. And as you might know, there is this distinction at RDA that interest group, so this IG, is a group which runs for longer period of time. It doesn't have any objective of producing specific outputs. It's basically an umbrella group where people around some community, around some topic, gather frequently, basically at every plenary, as it is in our case, and discuss topics which are relevant at that moment in time. And that's why we say that active DMP's interest group is the mother of all DMP groups. Anything, any discussion usually starts here. And then when there is a need to solve some specific challenge we identify as necessary, as something that all of us would like to have, then there is a possibility of interest groups creating working groups. And in the past, the interest group has created a couple of working groups. So one of them is this DMP Common Standard working group. There used to be also a working group on exposing DMPs, which was dealing with the idea of publishing contents of DMPs. And then there is also a third one, which is the MADMP Common API working group, which is currently in the making. It's under the community review, and you will hear about it in more details later today. I've skipped in describing the DMP Common Standards working group, and this is the one which was quite successful because we have produced a recommendation on machine actionable data management plans. And this is a group, this working group focuses on maintaining the official RDA recommendation. I will explain in the next few minutes what this DMP Common Standard working group did, because the idea of MADMPs is quite important also for the second working group about the API, but that's basically the distinction. So we always submit a proposal of a joint meeting because people who are in these groups overlap, and that makes most sense for us to meet in such a setting. Okay, so one of the things that we produced within the working group and also interest group were the Salzburg Manifesto and MADMPs. If you go to the website activedmps.org, you will find there a list of things that this interest group and people who are actively working on it are up to. This explains basically that we want to make MADMPs a reality, and we believe that we need to also give identifiers to DMPs. Anyone can support Salzburg Manifesto and anyone can support it. And the second thing that I think is a very good starting point for the newcomers is a paper which is called 10 Principles for MADMPs, where we discuss all different things that must happen to change data management plans into machine actionable data management plans, to make them more automated, to make them basically better integrated with the workflows of different stakeholders. And so this paper is written in a very high level. It's not a technical paper. It says what's the importance of present identifiers, what's the importance of reviewing, what's the importance of automation, what's the importance of making DMP writing not only a responsibility of a researcher, but also of other stakeholders. So if there is something you want to read to better understand what we're doing here, have a look at these two links. But going really back to the beginning regarding data management plans, to make sure we are on the same page, when we say DMPs and data management plans, I mean these documents that researchers are asked at different stage of the research to produce, which describe what data is produced in the project, what data is reused in the project, and what happens with afterwards, where it is stored, depending on the setup. You are either asked this before your project, when you write a proposal, or before your project starts, or in the project, at the end of the project. This depends basically on where you are located. And the key difference between DMPs and MADMPs is that in traditional DMPs, we, as the tool providers, were focusing on modeling questionnaires. So you had a situation like in this slide in the upper half. You had a question, who is responsible for the DMP, and an answer, Moritz from our university. This is not really machine actionable, meaning it's very hard to write a query to find out who is the responsible person. You need to use some text processing, some parsing. Nowadays, you would say you need to use AI to filter out information that Moritz is responsible for the DMP. And still, you wouldn't really know who is this Moritz, what is his surname, what is his identifier, email, contact, what is exactly his role in this DMP. That would be the challenge. And that's why we wanted to have a more structured way of representing this information, which you can see in the lower half of the slide, where we are reusing concepts from controlled vocabularies, from standards like DCAT. We're using present identifiers like here you can see ORCID, where we have roles from controlled vocabularies to specifically describe information on who is actually contributing to this DMP and what is the role of this person. And this is the change from the non-machine actionable DMPs to let's say, more machine actionable DMPs. Instead of modeling questionnaires, instead of modeling the templates from the funders, we want to model information in a kind of universal way, and that's why the working group was created. So if you want to get a feeling of what RDA does and how the RDA works, this is an example of what we did in the early phase of creating the recommendation. So we organized a set of workshops of on-site, but also we made the consultation online on GitHub where everyone was allowed to submit their user stories. The user stories were phrased, as you can see, as a stakeholder, I want something so that. So they were very openly defined for anyone. And we wanted to find out what information in the DMPs is really necessary and whether this information is consumed by others. So basically, we wanted to find out if there are some questions in the DMPs that are asked, but nobody needs them. And based on this analysis with the user stories, we came up to the definition of the common standard where we agreed on the minimum set of information that we want to model in the DMPs. So it doesn't fit to all funder templates. It's not an exhaustive list of fields, but it provides this common denominator that makes us believe from the experience that it can be used in America, Europe, Australia, Asia, and this basically should cover the key information that one could provide in the DMP and would need from the DMP. So this is the recommendation you can find on the website of RDA, and also it's published online. The MAD specification basically is a documentation which looks like this, like what you can see in the slide. It has a set of fields with descriptions and some examples, and it is tailored mostly to the software engineers who are building the tools to exchange information on MADMPs using this format. Right now, we have a wide range of adoptions. So basically, all of the tools that people use for writing DMPs have the feature of creating an MADMP. So we have the DMP tool from California, DMP Online from the UK, Data Stewardship Wizard, Argos, DAMAP, RDMO. We also have some funders who had some tests with it, all some data centers where they don't take completely the MADMP thing, but they take a subset of the concepts and also become interoperable in this way. And this is basically where I would like to stop the introduction. Do you have any questions about the groups, about the scope of RDA groups, or about the MADMPs themselves? So if you don't have any questions, then I would like to, oh, Jan.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello. You said you would like to have persistent identifiers for the DMPs. Did you mean for the DMP as a document or for the individual activities that are described in the DMP?
Mm-hmm. Well, so one thing is that within the DMP, we like using the identifier, present identifiers a lot. So as in the body of the DMP. But what the Salzburg Manifesto is referring to is basically referring to the idea of assigning the PIDs to documents. But the question is, what do you understand as a document? Do you understand it as a PDF document, or do you understand it as an API endpoint that provides this MADMP? This is not specified. This is still kind of open for discussion. So in other words, the question is whether you get this MADMP generated automatically as a metadata record, or do you really get it bound to a specific PDF? That's open for interpretation.
So if I take the data site typology of resources that could be described by the DOI, it could rather be a service than a document, as you say.
That's where I would rather go with this. But this is my opinion and not really like we have one coherent opinion on this.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, there might perhaps be snapshots that could have their own individual DOIs or
Exactly.
other PIDs.
Basically, the big challenge here with this DMP ID is not many people like sharing this information. So we are discussing about different authorization levels, which is something that Marek will cover in his talk about the API. And basically having a use case where this is like absolutely needed. So for example, we know that this practice of publishing DMPs works very well in the States. So the colleagues from the DMP tool have a collection of DMPs which get the IDs assigned, and people do this. But this is very likely also a result of the fact that people have to publish their proposals from the National Science Foundation. And this is maybe not the case in Europe. So please still discuss.
Yep. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Other questions? Okay, if not, then I will stop screen sharing and I will hand over to Alberto for his presentation.
Okay, thank you, Thomas. I'm going to share my screen.
Do you have permissions to do it?
Yeah, I hope so. Let me check if I can share my screen. I don't know if you are seeing my screen now.
I can see myself in your screen.
Okay, so the idea is to see this presentation. I'm going not to take too much of your time, but the idea here is to present a Python library for creating and validating data management plans. I am Alberto from the IRICIS, Biomedical Data Science and Engineering Unit at Hospital Ramón y Cajal in Madrid, and I'm going to start the presentation, not to spend a lot of time. Here you have a slide in every slide a link to the documentation and to the library. But first of all, thanks for the opportunity to speak today. I'm Alberto, and as part of our internal research support processes, we require every project to have a DMP, a data management plan, and to support that, we created our DMP template and decided to align it with the RDI DMP common standard, as you mentioned before. So the process of using this standard led us to the creation of MIDMPy, the library that I'm going to show you now. So why MIDMPy? The idea, or as you know, DMPs are becoming increasingly important, not just for compliance, but also for enable reproducible science. So you know that in practice, DMPs are often created manually, stored as PDF, Word documents, and disconnected from the project life cycle. So we needed something more dynamic, something that we could be integrated into automated workflows that allow us to create DMPs from code and validate them against a formal schema. That's the idea. There were some great initiatives, as you saw in the last slide, Thomas, around specifications, but we didn't find a ready-to-use Python library, so we decided to develop one, develop our own library based on the RDI standard. And that's our goal, to create and validate schemas and the DMPs based on the RDI standard. So what is MIDMPy? It's a library, a Python library, and that makes easy to work with DMPs, but in a programmatically way. This is more focused to developers, to people, and then let's see in the next slide. But the idea is to make it easy to work with DMPs, and the idea is that we support multiple features that are created a DMP from scratch, validating existing DMPs based on the standard, always based on the RDI common standard, and export them in a RDI compliant format. That's what we want. And it's built with Pydantic. Pydantic, it's a library which handles all the schema constraints, all the validations under the hood. That's the technology or the library we use to validate the fields So it's allows also switching between the standard version or the current standard version that are 1.0 and 1.1. So it's simple but powerful enough to integrate it into more complex workflows or tools. That's what we pretend. Here we see in this slide how it works. Is as I told you, it's a really focus on developers. But here you see how it can be possible to load a DMP, an empty DMP, and fill in the fields like datasets, contacts, identifiers, all following the specification, the standard. And then you can export the DMP in a JSON format following the schema in just a few lines of code. And also you can validate your DMP, your existing DMP, and in just one line of code. Here what we use is the DMPs existing in the GitHub repository of the RDI. That's what we used. And who can use it? Who it is for? Initially, we created that for our own internal use, and we quickly realized that it could be useful for a broader audience. So the idea is to publish the documentation as we did, and you have it here, and then for who can use that. Researchers who wants to automate DMP generation, developers working on research platforms, and institutions that need to validate and standardize their DMPs. And since it is in Python, it fits naturally with data pipelines, notebooks, APIs, web services, backends. So the idea is to make DMPs less of a burden and more of a useful artifact in the research process. That's what we pretend here. And just to finish, it is a really brief presentation. If you want to make some questions, what's next? We see MADMPy as a foundation we can build on, and the next steps include the following: improving documentation and examples. We have some on the documentation, but we can provide more. And another important thing is to making the tool more friendly for non-developers. That's what we pretend in the near future. Also, possibly adding support to related or for related metadata standards or APIs like Dublin Core or Synodo or another. And also we are here and we're open to feedback and also collaboration, whether you are a developer, researcher, data steward, whatever. We just want to see how to collaborate and to produce new tools in the fields of DMPs, and of course to adapt our library for the new version of the RDI DMP common standard, because we know that you are working in an update of the standard. So that's it. Feel free to check out the documentation, to try it out, and let us know what you think. Thank you very much. Here we have the web page of the documentation. All the code is public on GitHub. You can import the library. It's just a pip package, so you can install it really fast. It's really easy to use. Just import the modules and start creating your DMPs, importing the library, validating a DMP, creating a DMP, always following the RDI common standard. Thank you very much for your time and for the opportunity to present the library to you. If you have any questions, I will answer.
Thank you very much, Alberto. It was a very nice presentation and a very useful piece of code, I think, for everyone who wants to integrate MADMPs. This is exactly this kind of adoptions I think that RDA is looking for. And yes, there are some questions for you. So Jorge.
Yeah, thank you. I'm thinking about using this tool. Know some Python, but for ease of use, I guess it's not that easy to get it working so that all of our coworkers could use it, or front end to input. I mean, what use cases would you suggest it for on the institution for creating the DMPs? Thank you.
Okay, yeah, it's what we thought before we creating the library, and we started because we have a template, a DMP template based on the RDI Horizon Europe and other funders, and we created a DMP template for researchers to make it easy to create a DMP. But then we need to validate them, and the idea is to make the DMP a machine actionable DMP. That's why we create this library, to get the content of the DMP and to store in a database, and to proceed in the near future just to look up for researchers, data sets, projects, people involved in the project. But the use case is more focused on people who maintain or who are a developer in a data science unit or in a research lab, that are more aware of what researchers are doing, and it's more just as a backend library. But the use case is more focused on validate what the researcher wrote, and if every field is under the specification of the RDI specification, and then if everything is okay, we can proceed to validate the DMP. And if the DMP it's okay, we can store and we can proceed with the project, or just to give them some recommendation on you need to fill this field. For example, the contact using an identifier, or the researcher must have a DOI identifier. So that's just to validate, but in integrating with website or with a platform, it's just more like an auxiliary library. It's not trying to substitute the use of that steward wizard or these tools that we can use, or the DA DMP map, for example.
So front end is not included?
No.
Okay, so and we would then API connect to other tools or create our own front end for
Exactly.
inputting the data. Okay,
It's prepared. It's prepared to be imported by other modules and to create your own front end, and just you make calls to the API. It works like an API of the DMP common standard. That's the idea, to work like an API.
Okay, thank you.
Great.
So we can set up some checks to check if our researcher inputted all of the needed field and so on. Okay,
Exactly.
thank you.
Thank you.
We have a next question, Jana.
Hi, thanks for the presentation, Alberto. I have just a stupid question because I'm not a developer. What do you exactly mean by validation here? It's just like a check of the structure of the DMP?
Yeah.
It's only, not
The structure
content.
and the content. The structure
And
and the
also
content.
content.
Also the content, and every field of the RDI DMP specification is filled under the schema they propose. So we adapt the library to the schema. If tomorrow the RDI change the specification, we are going to change the requirements to develop the DMP.
Okay, thanks.
But just to make clear, it doesn't validate the correctness of what researchers have written.
Yes,
yeah?
I get that. Yeah.
Leila.
Yes, that is related to my question. So what do you validate in the content?
The content only validate the format. If the RDI specifications say that the name of the researcher should be a string, the library validate that it is a string and not a number. Or for example, if you need to introduce a DOI, a handle, or just an identifier, the library checks that you introduce the identifier, the name under this specific format. So if you need to put a list of, for example, a list of people involved in the project, the library check if this is a list and this is a string, but the library doesn't check if this guy exists or not. That's the validation. It's a specific validation under the format and the schema of the RDI.
Great. Any other questions? So I will allow myself to ask a question because, so first one comment regarding the DMP evaluation. So actually checking the contents, there is some work happening right now in OSTrails project. So I hope that the next plenary meeting of RDA will have something to report in that direction, which will go beyond the JSON validation. But a question to you, Alberto, because for me, it's very nice to see that you see a value in reusing information from MADMPs, because as I understood, you're using this library to get information to your database. And I'm really curious, what do you do with this information that you have in MADMPs later on? For what purposes you collect it?
Our purpose is that we have research project at the hospital, and every project is stored in a database or a database tool called RedCap. RedCap is a tool to store all the information that patients and doctors and people involved in a project introduce, like in a database. So then what we want is to link the project with the DMP. So the DMP is linked to the project, and then we can check during the life cycle of the project if the people of the researchers are complying with what we wrote in the DMP. Are you using this dataset? Are you producing this dataset with these fields, with these requirements? Are these sensitive information? Are these numeric information, string information? So we validate what we are doing, what they are doing in their projects. It's just for our internal validation of the projects.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Let's move on to the next part. Before we let Marek Suchanek talk, I will maybe quickly ask if Claire Austin is with us, because Claire Austin has something to report. If Claire is not here, then I have 3 slides to show on her behalf. So Claire Austin is working on the governmental extension to the RDA Common Standard, and she said that there is a new release that was published. It's the release 2.5, which comes with the JSON schema as well and the MADMP generation form. And basically what she did with a group of her co-workers is they took the RDA recommendation as a starting point and added a set of fields, constraints. Basically, they have created their own application profile on top of the MADMP specification to cover up for the governmental needs. So she's doing it for the work in Canada, and this is her main use case, governmental use cases in Canada. But as she says, this should also work somewhere else. So please have a look if you're interested in how you can customize MADMPs also to your needs. So if there are some fields which you don't need, or some fields which you actually want to have, how she did it. And she also has provided some MADMP generation forms. So it's not only the work about the conceptual model and modeling, adding some classes. There is also a link. There's also a simple web form where you can generate an MADMP which is following this governmental extension. So I will provide later the links in the meeting minutes as Marek will be presenting, but that's an information announcement I wanted to give on behalf of Claire. So I think we don't have any questions because there is none of us who can answer these questions. That's why I would like to hand over now to Marek.
Thank you. I will start the presentation and share the screen. Give me a minute. Now we should be able to see the screen.
Yes, we can.
Thank you very much. So I'm Marek Suchanek from Czech Technical University in Prague, and I will do a brief presentation on updates from OSTrails, but also on maintenance of the DMP common standard, and then our work towards the common MADMP API working group. So in OSTrails project, we are working on this plan, track, assess framework. Part of that are these pathways, so basically connections between various types of tools within the RDM ecosystem. And on this slide, you can see basically connections between repositories, SKG, fair assessment tools, and DMP platforms. That's why it's relevant for this group as well. We have also a different view, more detailed, related to specific data transfers between the tools. You can, of course, read more. I will go just very briefly through it. You can read the deliverables. And in a more recent deliverable, we came up with this reference architecture. And what we are interested here during this meeting is, of course, the DMP platform component with the MADMP API, which should serve basically to other tools to read DMPs, but also somehow adjust or modify the DMPs in the DMP platforms. If we go back a bit to these pathways, we basically take a look at it that there is the box DMP platforms, and we have it as part of the architecture, and the technical pathways are basically realized by the API calls. In the DMP platform, we are working on basically 3 levels. We take the DMP common standard from RDA as a basis. Then we plan to build this application profile, which should basically put it to the context of basically European context, because this is European project, and then build the API on top of that. If I go into more detail, basically if we take a look how DMP platforms look like inside, they typically have some data model. Different tools may have different data models. Some are more oriented to machine actionable DMP by design from the data model. Some are more focused on being a questionnaire. Some are more focused on alignment with other standards. Then there is, of course, some user interface, because you want some user input to specify what the researcher plans to do with data in their projects. And then usually they need some document. So they need to have the PDF document for the funder, but also potentially other documents. For example, some checklist or some table for internal use, etc. And then there are also some custom integrations typically, and these custom integrations can be with different types of tools. Some can be repositories, some registries, SKGs, fair assessment tools, and also other. And this is related basically to the architecture. But in the current situation, DMP platforms usually have these like more spaghetti architecture integrations. To avoid that, we want to make a difference by having a common model, which is based on the RDA DMP common standard, and also API. If we take a look again closer to these two, the common model, so we know this pretty well, but in the context of the project of the OS Trails, but we also heard that there are other efforts related. We are building this application profile that will enhance and extend the DMP common standard in some way, lay additional constraints, add new fields, add new entities, basically to relate what is needed in the European context. This is done with a lot of national and thematic pilots within the project. The second part is the API. Back to the pathways, we, for example, have seen that DMP platforms should be able to provide DMPs to other services as well as other things. And this is then materialized as basically some endpoints in API. So this is the vision of the OS Trails project, what we are working on, and it is closely related to our activities in the RDA, in this working group, and also in the new working group that I will talk about shortly. And first step is basically pushing the maintenance of DMP common standard. If you attended or took a look at our web page or the repo, you probably noticed that there is a lot of activity going on during these days. Basically, within the project, we are reviewing the issues, adding new issues and discussing, and then suggesting back to the community some solutions and waiting basically what we get from you from the national context. So there are new issues, but we are also closing issues as we are solving them. There are, of course, issues related to pull requests. And we now use also these projects in the RDA working group. So you can clearly see what is under discussion, where the solution is already decided and will be implemented and what has been done towards this new version 1.2, which we want to release before summertime. If you would be looking where you can contribute to discussions, we are now labeling the issues, so you can take a look by this filter where some discussions should be ongoing. We have also some other labels as well, so you can more easily navigate through these. And we also use this working group website at RDA portal, which is basically the way how to trigger you some email announcements if you are members of the group, because there are no mailing lists at this point. And the last one is that I've sent there a post with some hot issues. So if you would have some time and interest in this, you could take a look, for example, at some suggestion how to improve all the description and example values, how we plan to rework the identifiers, how we want to clean up and restructure the repository before the next release, and then from that release go in the more structured way. We are also discussing how to express if something is planned. There is some suggested solution from our group. And finally, one of the long-term topics that is there from the very beginning, and it's gaining more and more attention, is how to extend the schema. And that's so important that I added extra slide for that. So we need these extension mechanisms to be clearly defined. You've seen that, for example, from the slides of Claire, that they are building some extension, but we know that there are some extensions also in some DMP tools. For example, colleagues in California have some adjustments, some edit fields as they need. But we also know about these national efforts. And they are more emerging. For example, as I mentioned in the OS Trails, but I'm also involved in another project in Czech Republic, a national repository platform, where we also plan to have some extension to MADMPs to align with the architecture of basically EOSC-CZ. So there is a real need to deal with this, and we want to deal with this before the next release. And it's also related to the restructuring of the repository. So if you have some experience with using the MADMP common standard and did some extension, need to adjust something, it would be really beneficial if you contribute to the discussion and share your experience. So for the maintenance, there are some actions that you can take to help. Basically, check the relevant GitHub issues, contribute there to the discussions. Basically, contribute there so we do it in the way that it works for you. Suggest solution, or at least approve the suggested solution. So as I mentioned, for example, from the project, we agree on something, but we of course don't directly do the changes. We suggest the solution and wait if there are some reactions on that. So it's always good to get at least the approval, at least by some reaction. Like GitHub also allows just the thumbs up, so why not? And of course, be prepared for the next release. And also, this brings me to the API working group. So this is what Thomas already mentioned. And this group is not yet endorsed. In community review, we submitted the statement of work, but you can already join the group. We can see that we already have like 38 members, and we already started to work on several things. So we are already hacking. We want to push it because we want to have some initial draft again by summertime. And we had a hackathon in Athens, which was collocated with this OSTR's General Assembly meeting in March. And we gathered representatives of many DMP platforms and also some additional stakeholders, for example, from ArrowHub. And we discussed how this API should look like, how the endpoints should be structured, how should we deal with authorization and authentication, and stuff like that. We decided to set up bi-weekly calls, not of course for this small group of people who attended the hackathon, but everyone. It's open and it's posted also on the website of the RDA working group. And we will also have a next hackathon hosted by Thomas in Vienna in May this year. As I mentioned, these bi-weekly calls, there is one today, later in the afternoon of European time. You can take a look at this webpage. In events, you will find the Zoom link, and you can add it to your calendars and join and discuss with us. What we are basically doing there, we are not yet in a phase that we would be doing open API specification in the YAML or JSON document, but we are more in brainstorming phase when we are doing the specification in Google document and basically commenting, suggesting changes, and there is always someone responsible now for endpoint to work on it before next meeting and then report and discuss with others. So there is also possibility to contribute to this document even if you are not able to join the meeting. So again, some actions. If you are interested in API, please join the working group, join the meetings. This is not related. You can of course join the meetings, not being in the working group yet, and contribute to the discussions. So that's it from me, and I see that there are potentially some questions in the chat. Yeah, thanks Thomas for sending all the links there.
There are no questions for you in the chat. It was some discussions and links mostly, but I think you have covered a lot of interesting topics. So I would basically like to open the third part of the meeting discussion, basically by starting with questions to Marek about anything he has said. Heike.
I hope I'm now unmuted. You had the connection between DMPs and fair assessment. So I wondered against what are you assessing? How did you create the matrices? And how is this represented in the DMP? And I mean, this OS Trails project is a pretty broad project, I think, with many different disciplines. And I saw that there are at least 2 synchrotrons among them. For example, for what I would consider, for example, do you have like more like an administrative fair assessment, or do you go down to the disciplinary fair assessment? For example, in these for the synchrotrons, you've said we need to know what kind of sample has been measured. So otherwise the data will never be fair. Or if you find a stone, you need like a geographical location or something like this. So is this somehow connected or part, and templates get into this?
Yeah. Okay, thanks for interesting question. I can try to answer and then ask Tomasz if he wants to say something more because he's also involved. basically the relation between DMP platforms and fair assessment is that DMP platforms may trigger fair assessment for example, mentioned DOIs of some data sets in the data management plans. Thomas also mentioned the DMP evaluation service, which is something different, and that can also transitively trigger these assessments. And in terms of assessments in OS Trails and what you asked about these domain-specific things, the framework is very generic. Thomas just sent a link to the test, basically model of the metrics and benchmarks, etc. And basically, it should be possible to specify these tests for domain-specific things and reuse them in basically some sets of tests, if I say it very, very roughly. But we are not there yet in building these inside the project. There are pilots starting just like, I think, this month or some of the next months. And they will be looking at this and specify these tests. But at this point, it's about just setting up the framework for it. Tomas, do you want to add more?
Actually, I was just trying to dig out some slides which we have about the evaluation service. In case there is some time, I can show them later. But I think to answer your question, Heike, is that first of all, we want to standardize what people mean by fair assessment by providing this common metadata standard, which I have pasted in the chat. Because the common problem of fair assessment is that some people are measuring something like if a data set has a DOI, and some other tools are saying it is good that a data set has a DOI. And as you said, among different domains, there are different practices of what is fair and what is not fair. So first thing, we want to come up with a technical specification of how to represent what you are actually measuring and whether your measurement includes the opinion or not. And then the second part is working with these domains, working with the synchrotrons, or working with the colleagues from Grenoble, for example, on defining their specific set of metrics and benchmarks following our taxonomy. And some of them are already registered in fair sharing. More of them will come. And this is also the role of defining things for the national pilots. But what is supposed to be common is supposed to be a common way of representing what you are actually testing for. And this is the part about the fair assessment. And then comes the fair assessment in the DMP tools. And here we have some discussions on what does it mean to test the fairness in the DMP. Because if you look at the DMP, it consists of links to data sets. So for example, a DMP says, I will produce 5 data sets and I will give them all CC BY license. And you can read out information from the DMP and you can test if what you have written is actually compatible with what you consider fair. So if you consider assigning a CC BY license to data sets, you will say, good, you are fair. But we have also this part where the DMP is produced at the end of the life cycle, where the DMP describes what you have done. And then you have two options. One option is, again, to read out information from the DMP, which says, I have put my data sets in Zenodo, they all have a DOI and a CC BY, and working only with this information from the MADMP, you are saying this is very fair or this is not very fair. Or you have a second possibility to go directly into the repository because the DMP contains a DOI pointing to the repository. So you go to the repository, you run the fair assessment on the objects in the repository and report it back. And this is kind of the discussion on what the DMP evaluation actually means. And this is where specific community, specific domain will have to also adjust it to their needs. What do they want to assess? Do they want to assess the real data sets, or only do they want to make assertions about things described in the DMP? So this was a very lengthy answer. Sorry for that.
Yeah, it's complicated. It was a complicated question. I think this discussion about the fair assessment, fair matrix can go forever. So I stop here.
Any other questions to Marek regarding the API, the maintenance, the extensions, the application profiles? Because as I was saying, this is part of the discussion. And for this part, we have actually some questions prepared for you to stimulate your discussion. So first of all, what do you think about the things you have just heard? Also from Alberto, also about what Claire is doing. Is there anything else regarding DMPs that you would like to share with others? So this is a moment for all these spontaneous things to report about any progress you have made with DMPs or any kind of challenges you may have. And are there any other relevant topics than the DMP, than MADMPs? Because as I said, a lot of effort is now focused on MADMPs, APIs, validation, evaluation, but maybe we are not seeing something else which is important. Jan.
Yes. Marek, do you think this MADMP endpoint could be integrated with a project management system that would somehow track the work items that every person has to do, or something like that?
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for this one, because yeah, this is basically covered by the other that I mentioned on the slide, because we also
Yeah.
has these CRIS systems
Yep.
in the OS project, and we also have from DSW some experience with this, that people are attaching this information management systems related to project information, so they like track what is going on in the DMPs, but also provide information to DMPs, for example, basic information about the project, about contributors, etc. And if we cover this in the common API, it will be, of course, simpler and unified across different DMP platforms. So yeah, there could be some more direct connectors between CRIS systems and DMPs.
Yeah. So for instance, if there is requirement to report to the funder, say the final or interim report on a project, the DMP in its current stage could be exported very easily from an MADMP platform through the API, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Good. Thanks.
You are muted, Tomasz.
Any other questions? Any other comments, statements?
Yeah, I have a comment. The API is the basic for interoperability and machine actionable, so the dates have to be, it's the basic if you have to want to connect it anywhere. There was mentioned before that there was a minimum set of information that DMP should include. But for the API, you have to have the most possible things to be loaded. Also have endpoints for each of this part. So what's your approach, Marek, in this minimum or maximum?
Yeah, well, the API will follow what is in the DMP common standard, so the minimum. And of course, we are now discussing also in the maintenance that maybe some fields should be added, but we are always a bit careful to add new things. So it must be really needed. And the same principle should be for the API. And the API should also work with these extensions somehow. So the tool or basically any institution should be able to then take this machine actionable API specification and extend it if they need. Same as it should be with the standard, with the schema. So yeah,
So the minimum should be covered, and then individual institution extended by need.
Yeah. Yeah, and of course, if they then in the extension find out that it's like verified and makes sense potentially for others, they can suggest it back to the standard. And we can then discuss on like broader scale if it makes sense to include it or not.
Yes, but I see a lot of here on back ping pong on this to cover some additional fields.
But you know, the whole point is that the question is, do we need to have the full coverage with every single template? Because even now, when you have a template, the typical DMP template from a funder, and they have this 100 auxiliary questions, it doesn't mean you have to answer all the 100 auxiliary questions. So a very obvious thing to do would be to, for each question, define a field, and that's it. And this is what I was saying about we don't want to model the questionnaires, yeah? Some of the questions can be compacted into one field. Some of the questions are basically not relevant because nobody cares about them. We all know that. And that's why we were trying to have this pragmatic approach. Plus, this is the motivation for this OS Trace application profile, that we don't want to end up having like, you know, Polish national template, Czech national template, French national template, German national template. We are trying to aggregate on that level, see what can be, what are these, 15, 20 fields that people are missing. Some time ago at the RDA Hackathon 2020, we looked at the funder extension. And then the idea was, we don't want to create an extension per funder. I don't want to have an National Science Foundation extension, Horizon Europe extension. We thought, what are the extra fields we may put into one extension that addresses the things that are currently missing in MADMPs? And we have now somewhere a draft document where this is like, 8 fields, 7 fields, 9 fields, nothing huge, yeah? So usually we start by seeing, oh my God, everyone is super special. But the more you discuss, you realize we simply very often use different terms for describing the same thing, yeah? And this is exactly what I think the value of RDA is, to have this discussion and then to basically produce maybe one extension and not 20 extensions. As much as having your own extension may be a very tempting thing to do.
Yeah, but I see the use cases are so diverse. Like we was discussing on our call, a lot of different data types that are included in one data management plan. So you have to, I mean, the answer for each of these data sets is different for if it's need to be whatever. So you have the broader, yeah, it's always a lot of different ways of information to be connected. Also, okay, I am not so much in this work, so I don't know.
There's always time to join us, so we are open.
Yeah.
Any other comments, questions, observations? Hopefully not complaints. From those who are here for the first time, is anything that needs clarification? Okay, I don't see any hands up. Then I think we will basically move to the wrapping up of the session. Okay. So the last part is basically we discussed today about the story of the RDA group, what we do, what we don't do, what is the relationship between the working group and interest group. I gave you a quick introduction into MADMPs, and then we had a follow-up presentations from Alberto about the MADMP Python library for manipulating DMPs, then a short information on the governmental extension from Claire, and then Marek presented us with the ongoing work on maintenance of the recommendation, as well as the new working group that is currently being formed under the community review. And as basically a wrap up, one of the things I would like to again stress is have a look at the Salzburg Manifesto. There is also a way to support it. So please support Salzburg Manifesto by going to the ActiveDMPs.org website. Please also sign up to the new RDA working group regarding the API. Please join our calls. There is a call today at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And I have also pasted a link in the chat to the hackathon we are organizing in Vienna. The hackathon will take place on the 27th of May. We have roughly 15 spots available. So if you are interested in the work on the MAD MPI API, so if you're going to participate in these biweekly calls and you would like to influence how this API looks like, then please feel free to join us. Just sign up to the document I have pasted in the chat. Maybe shoot me an email letting know that you're coming, and everyone is more than welcome to join. We need multiple viewpoints. The goal of the hackathon in Vienna is really to get a very first stable draft of the API specification that we can start testing how to integrate it with other tools. So these are the links to the active data management plans interest group, to DMP Common Standards working group. I still need to update the slide with another working group we are starting. In case you need to read something or need to cite some publications, here is a list of things we have published. You can also find a list of publications in the GitHub repository of the RDA Common Standard. So this could be a very good way to get informed about the history, developments, and decisions we did. And of course, anytime if you have any questions, please just don't hesitate to contact the chairs of the group, because among the chairs, we also have other colleagues who are not with us here today. So we have Kevin Ashley, we have Eli Papadopoulou, we have colleagues from California, John Hodacki, Becky Grady. So there's always somebody who is close to your time zone. Of course, I must not forget about Peter Nish, who is from Melbourne in Australia, and he will be hosting us at the next plenary in Australia. And my docking station crashed, which is also an indication that I should stop presenting, and this is the end of the meeting. So thank you very much for participation, for joining, for the discussions, and see you at the next plenary.